Okay.
Well, that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Aman.
Thank you, Venerable.
Mm, Maybe do you want to say something about CKSL, Aman, in case some people don't know what
Sure. So
CKSL is?
yes, I should have
Probably a
said
good
that.
idea.
Yes, thank you. So CKSL, Choe Khor Sum Ling, is a center, is a FPMT center, which of course the spiritual director is Lama Zopa Rinpoche, as many of us know. It's a center which was established in 2003-4, if I'm not wrong. It was a study center in the beginning, and now it's a physical center in Bangalore. It's actually in the middle of Bangalore, in like the hub of Bangalore, in Domlur. And to all those who are in Bangalore, it's a good news that we are opening the center next week as a soft launch, because it's a temple as well. You can come in there, you can read books, and you can meditate as well, and you can just relax there, you can prostrate there, you can do your japas there. So we are opening the center next Saturday, just for the weekends for now, because COVID is still a thing, but with all the precautions for Saturdays and Sundays, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can know more about us by going to the website cksl.in, or you can write to us at info@cksl.in. For right now, we have the courses online, like this session with Venerable Legtsok. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can write to us at info at cksl.in. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Aman. And hello to everyone and welcome. So, as Aman said, this is a very kind of informal session. And I hope you all have a lot of questions, or will think of, questions or useful comments. I don't have a lot of prepared remarks from my side, but let's start with just reflecting on our motivation, try to generate a motivation of universal compassion, loving kindness, and bodhicitta. Right. So remember your interaction with all sentient beings, beginning with your mother and father, your family, friends, neighbors, people you care about, and including also people who you find difficult getting along with, people you dislike, and then also strangers and animals, all the animals, human beings, all beings in the different realms of existence. So try to include them all in your motivation, generate a wish to bring about welfare and benefit to oneself and all such beings. And then especially remembering, since the topic of the session is the restless mind, and using meditation as an antidote or to reduce disturbing states, especially restless mind. We can generate a motivation that we gain some insight into that, which leads us and all such beings to full enlightenment. Okay, so thinking about the topic for today, meditation and the restless mind. I was starting to think, well, what do we mean by restless mind? What are different forms of kind of restlessness in mind? One thing that comes to mind first is just like a study I heard about. There's a TED talk. I think we'll share the link in the chat box. There's two TED talks we'll share the link to. One by the founder of Headspace. I forget his name, but he actually mentions, and then the other by this guy Matt Killingsworth, who actually created and carried out this study. Might be an ongoing study. So the founder of Headspace actually cites that study in his talk. But the study by Killingsworth was carried out, I think, in like 2009, 10, 11 or so. And he's part of the whole field of researchers in kind of field of psychology, looking at what is happiness, what are causes of happiness and well-being. So his question was, well, there's a lot of, well, there's some data that shows, that people, if you have if you have more money, basically, to some degree, you're generally a little more happy than those who don't, because you don't have to worry about like paying the bills and things, but not significantly. And if you're married rather than single, tend to be a little bit happier because maybe you have that kind of support. But also, again, it's not a significant predictor of happiness. And even people like there's things that show when people get a promotion at work or they get a raise, they are, they are generally happier for a little while, but then it kind of goes up and then plateaus off again. So his kind of this Killingsworth, his what do you say? His theory was that maybe happiness doesn't have to do with sort of those other factors. Also, if you have a college degree, it's a little bit of a predictor of more satisfaction in life than not. But his theory was that maybe happiness has more to do with your kind of quality of awareness, moment to moment, rather than possessions or money or social status or relationships with people. So anyway, he created this this kind of app for iPhones where people accept to be randomly asked about what they're doing and what's their state of mind during the day. And so he collected this huge data set, like 1,000, over 160,000 answers from like 65,000 people in 80 different countries. And he found, and then he did, statistical analysis on people's feedback. And what he found was there was a very strong correlation between mind wandering and unhappiness. And there's a strong correlation between whatever you're doing, if you're focused on what you're doing at that time, and satisfaction and happiness. So he's saying like, even people are doing something they typically don't like a commute, like driving in a commute to work. But if they're just focused on just commuting, on just driving to work in that moment, they tend to be happier and more satisfied in that moment than if they're thinking about something else in the past, the future. If they're thinking about something other than doing. And then another thing he found was that people, on average, people are not thinking about what they're doing, not focused on what they're doing, on average, about 30% of the time or more. So in many activities, and then he breaks it down by like activities. So people, when they're like doing something like showering or brushing their teeth, people are generally distracted and thinking about something else like more than 50% of the time. And then while they're like, I think like cooking or cleaning the house, about 40% of the time on average, and so forth. So he found, yeah. So he found in that study, there's a big correlation between not being focused on what you're doing in the moment and not feeling satisfied, not being happy, not enjoying. And then conversely, being focused in the moment and feeling kind of content and happy. And then looked up there's some other research. There's a strong correlation with what's called rumination, which is a type of mental wandering. Rumination, but rumination is more specifically characterized by, at least in the mental health field, by like thinking again and again in a negative way, specifically about like negative things, like worrying about, in the future I might get sick, or does this person really like me or not, or you know what's another example of rumination? Why doesn't the government do something about pandemic? Why don't people get vaccinated? Maybe kind of things we're ruminating about these days, maybe. But there's a big correlation between rumination, where you kind of obsessively think about, and negative thought patterns, and depression. Big correlation with depression. It can be a big, it can lead to depression, be involved with depression a lot. But then in the more specifically the Buddhist context, thinking about restless mind, it's definitely something the Buddha addressed, like I was trying to think in different contexts. Well, for example, think about in the context of the 10 non-virtuous actions. The 4 non-virtues of speech are lying, harsh speech or abusive speech, slander, and then idle gossip. So idle gossip, why is that in the 10 non-virtuous actions? So idle gossip generally is characterized by like speaking in a way that's not meaningful. It's not beneficial to you, not beneficial to another person. You're just talking just to pass the time, or just recounting things other person said without any point, right? Um, and just maybe just sharing kind of trivial information, yeah, without any specific context to benefit yourself, to benefit another. So it's like the opposite of meaningful speech. It's meaningless speech, idle gossip. So why is that a non-virtue? Well, partly probably because it leads to a lot of meaningless thought. Generally, what do we think about? We think about the things we talk about. We talk about the things we think about. So there's a saying, I remember when I was more meditating in Theravada tradition in Thailand, there was a saying that like 1 minute of speech leads to 1 hour of thought. 1 hour of thought leads to one whole day or weeks of 1 hour of conversation leads to a whole day or week of thought, right? So we tend to think about conversations that we've had a lot. So if we have a lot of conversations that are meaningless, then we still think about that. It doesn't mean we don't necessarily think about it. So we end up thinking about a lot of trivial things that maybe are not particularly beneficial to us or others. And then the drawback of that is, we end up kind of wasting our life, wasting a lot of time in our lives when we could be doing something meaningful. And then another place like the restlessness comes up is how the Buddha advises, especially like in the Pali Canon and the Vinaya Sutras, advises. Is there something I should be looking at in the chat? Oh, the 10 non-virtuous actions. Can you repeat? Maybe I'll come back to it. I didn't go through them all. I just mentioned the 10 non-virtues of speech, the 4 non-virtues of speech. But you can Google it also easily. That's something you can easily find. But in the Vinaya, the Buddha advises again and again, especially to the ordained people, to guard your 3 doors. And guard your 3 doors. So the 3 doors, your body, speech, the actions of your body, speech, and mind. Be mindful of your actions of body, speech, and mind. So especially but also there's advice to guard your sense doors, which means your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and your body sense power, because there's different kinds of restless mind. Like one kind is like, imagine we're walking down the street, and I know when I was the first few years I was in India, I had a real problem with this. I'd really find myself like stumbling over things on the street because there's so much going on compared to like where I grew up in the United States. You walk down the street and it's like, suburbia. There's like 1 yard, then another yard, and a house, and another yard. There's not much, and there's hardly anybody there. There's most people that you see are in cars driving by, and you're just walking down the street kind of alone. Whereas, then in like Dharamsala or Bodh Gaya, there's tons of people on the street, and people on bicycles, and some people walking. Then there's a cow comes along, there's goats, and then there's dogs, and then there's auto rickshaws and people on a motorbike, and they're coming all directions. And there's a lot more activity on the street than there used to. And then there's so many shops, in the US too. Also, when there's shops, there's like one storefront. There's just kind of a plain storefront, and then another one, and then another one, and they each have a door. But like in Bodh Gaya, there's a barber under a tree, and then there's a butcher right next to that, just an open stall, and then there's a cafe coffee day on one side, and then there's someone selling cotton candy right next to that. There's just like tons of things like there's tons of things to look at, right? Especially for someone who's new to that environment. So I often remember just walking on the street and kind of looking around like distractedly, exactly what the Buddha says you're not supposed to do. He advises the monks, especially when you're walking, to look 2 yokes in front of you. So imagine the length of the yoke on like a plow. Like, you see people still plowing bullocks here in South India. It's about, I don't know, usually between the person who's, usually standing behind the actual blade of the plow and the ox, there's a on a piece of wood that's strapped to the ox's neck, I guess, their chest. And so that's, I don't know, it's about 2.5, 3 meters long. So the Buddha says, basically look to keep your eyes, focused on the ground when you're walking about, 4 or 5 meters in front of you, and walk mindfully. Shantideva also says in Bodhisattva's Way of Life, walk mindfully, and then when you want to relax your attention, stop and look around, right? Don't just walk down the street looking around like all over the place. Also, when we imagine, or see, we imagine or read or see like videos depicting the Buddha's early life, one of the things that you see in the sutras is that people found really inspiring about the Buddha and his disciples is they have such great composure. When they walk in public, they're very mindful, very composed, and therefore they walk, kind of grace and eloquence, and clearly from their mind being subdued, meaning their mind not like jumping all over the place, not being completely restless, from their mind being very subdued. Then also their speech is very, well considered, gentle, and is appealing and meaningful. They speak in a way that's meaningful, in a way that benefits people. And then also their comportment is very impressive. So that's some of the benefits of not having a restless mind. So yeah, one kind of restless mind is when our attention is just jumping to like things we see, things we hear, is jumping around all the time. But I think that partly that could be, if we're like that a lot, sometimes we're like that, could be related to not having a sense of what we want to focus our attention on, which can come from not having a sense of like what we want to be doing with our lives, how we want to be directing our energy and our attention. So definitely, I think having a long-term goal, like wishing to achieve full enlightenment, is kind of a highest goal, or wishing to be free from samsara, or just wishing to have a mind of loving kindness, wherever we go, just wishing to radiate kindness to people around us, or as simple as just wishing to kind of subdue our mind by being present in the present moment and fully experience, whatever it is we're doing. But like Shantideva also says in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, that whenever we engage in an action, first set your intention, like thinking, now I'm going to, walk from here to here. Now I'm going to sit and do this. Now I'm going to focus my attention on that. So at the outset, think, now this is what I'm going to do now. Be aware of that, and then be mindful of the action as you do it. And then at the end, recognize you've completed that. Now you're going to move on to a next action. Shantideva also says, any Dharma practice done with a distracted mind is sort of powerless, as it's not going to bear much fruit. But a lot of, I think, when we have I mean, there's so many different kinds of restless minds. So I'm looking forward to your questions about, what you have questions about or insights about. But a lot of, I think, a restless mind comes back to dissatisfaction, right? Which is one translation of suffering, just being dissatisfied. So I think oftentimes when we find like maybe we have a job that we don't like. So while we're doing that job, we want to think about everything, with us as much as we can. We want to think about everything else except what, we're doing, or maybe we're with a person we don't like, or there's something we don't like about ourselves, so we try to escape by thinking about something else. So a lot of time when we're in any kind of dissatisfying situation, um, one way to maybe kind of reduce displeasure with that is to just think about something else, right? That can be one kind of restless mind. So I don't know. I think some of the most helpful fundamental advice is just try to be aware, and this is where meditation can help. Is we need to be aware of what's going on in our own mind, and so the basic meditation is just sitting still, um, and letting go of everything else that's going on in our lives, and just focusing on our own mind, right? Whether we take our breath as an object or a visualized image, or we just take our mind itself as an object, or whether we're going for refuge or generating the four immeasurables. There's all different kinds of things, but one fundamental component of meditation is that there's mindfulness of an object of meditation and introspection, or meta awareness of our own mind, what's happening in our own mind. So that's the real skill that we conscientiously and deliberately cultivate through meditation. It's being aware of what's going on in our mind. So that helps us first identify, like, when are we restless? When are we distracted? When are we ruminating, or obsessively thinking about something in a destructive way, in an unhealthy way? And then the next step, so the first step is just to be aware of what's happening in our own mind and identify kind of destructive ways of focusing our attention or being distracted. And then the second step is to think about the causes. Right? The fundamental Buddha taught is every compounded phenomena arises from causes and conditions. So when our mind is restless and distracted, it's not happening for no reason. It's not the creation of some powerful spirit or something. It's arising from causes that somehow we've created that exist in our lives. And so we need to look at, well, why is my attention going here or going there? Why am I thinking about this again and again? Why do I feel restless? So look for the causes and then address those different causes. So because there could be so many different kinds of restless mind, so many different kinds of causes, then there's many different methods to address different kinds of restless mind. And then one last thing before I stop speaking and address your questions is that I think in Buddhism we tend to speak a lot about, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. Well, in Buddhism generally we tend to speak a lot about meditation as a remedy for all different problems. And in Tibetan Buddhism, especially Gelugpa tradition, we tend to speak about sort of rational analysis of our problems as leading to a solution. But I think that's a little naive sometimes, because I think for many people, there's a kind of almost like a physical restlessness that comes, like being antsy, not being able to sit still, or maybe even like having anxiety, such as hyperventilate. When there's a lot of physical, say, kind of symptoms that come, sometimes our mental states can be so strong that I think it's not realistic for a lot of people just to sit down and meditate. They need to do something physical to be able to get just to a calm state where they can sit and meditate. So I know that when I was new to meditation, you can see that, even now, you can see if sometimes you just can't sit still. You need to get up and go for a walk. And that's a better way to like reduce your restlessness, to move or do like conscientious movement, like walking or yoga or other kind of exercise, gardening. But because the energy that sort of drives the way our mind moves is related to is related to physical energy in our body. So when we can do physical activity, that brings more equilibrium and balance to the energy in our body. Of course, that helps our mind be more still, and then and such that we can work with our mind more constructive way. So like in advice for generating calm abiding for meditation, there's there's advice about like eating in moderation, um, not eating food that's too spicy or too, it's too strong of flavors, not eating too much. Those things can stir up your mind. Being in a place that's not, not full of noise or cluttered or crowded, but being in a place that's clean. And sometimes going to, being in a space that's open where you have a distant view, where the air is fresh. Um, bathing, being clean before you meditate, and then doing stretches, doing yoga, walking. All those things help to kind of reduce restlessness in a way. And then also breath. I think working with the breath can be very helpful. I know in the FPMT, the Lama Yeshe, and I think also Lama Yeshe, one idea he had, which has kind of become a custom in FPMT, is when teaching people new to meditation, teaching them the nine round breathing. Where you take deep breaths, exhale through the right nose, exhale to the left nose, and then exhale through both noses, and visualize eliminating, the energy of anger, eliminating the energy of attachment, and eliminating the energy of ignorance, and thereby bringing some balance to the mind. So that kind of deep breathing exercises, because it also is working with sort of physical energy as well, can help reduce restlessness a lot. Okay, so I'll stop there, and then I hope you have some questions or comments so we can talk about.
So if anyone has any questions, they can ask now via just unmuting their mic. Or if you feel hesitant, you can always write to me on chat and I can ask them on your behalf. Okay. But till people are thinking of their questions, could I ask one, Venerable? Is it okay?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So Venerable, I was just talking to some of my friends while I was traveling last week, and of course, a topic of meditation came up. One of the common things that I heard from all three people was that meditation is boring. That why would I want to do something which is boring? I could rather play sports, or I could rather swim, or I could just watch Netflix. Why do I want to do something which is boring?
Right.
Now, what would you want to say to them, Venerable?
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, that's kind of a difficult one for me because I never found that myself, maybe. But I can imagine, why. I can imagine, someone having that view. Yeah. Then why would they want to do meditation? Because it's boring. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't really take interest in meditation until they have some real life crisis, until they're facing a real problem in life, like the death of a friend or severe sickness or real like financial problem, like incredible stress. And then they have this kind of mental torment that they can see just going to the gym, watching movies, going out with friends. It doesn't help. I think for many people, they need that kind of, you need to be jolted in, into, you need to be faced with the need to have such mental turmoil that you see you need something more than the kind of ordinary things that entertain and fascinate us. That's kind of one scenario. Another is, I don't know, like thinking about death. I mean, that's kind of one of the main, when we recognize that this life isn't going to last forever, eventually we're going to die, then what happens after death? But some people are just not interested in those kind of questions. You can't force them to be interested in those things, no? So, yeah. But then, I mean, another is like, what is the potential of our own mind, and how can we sort of grow, manifest that potential, cultivate it such that we're able to generate more positive qualities that we want. Like going to the gym and, going out with friends and watching movies and going dancing and stuff, or swimming. Yeah, those things are all nice, but it's not going to, if you have a problem with anger, say you get angry at someone in your family again and again, or you get angry with coworkers and stuff, it's not really going to help you reduce your anger and all the problems that come with anger, whereas meditation can quite directly. So that's kind of, but someone might say, well, I don't have a problem with anger. Then okay, maybe they don't need to meditate. Maybe it's not something everybody needs if they don't have a goal of achieving liberation and enlightenment, or achieving a happy future rebirth, which not everybody does. So it's okay. We're not trying to make everybody in the world meditate.
So, Venerable, I have a question,
Mhm.
and
Please.
a fairly basic one. And the topic today is mind, restless mind. But what I want to know is, how does Tibetan Buddhism view the difference between brain, mind, and consciousness, right? Because mind and consciousness are used kind of interchangeably. And as we have understood, mind is something within the brain or ability of brain to perhaps think. But there's generally a lack of clarity on how meditation, Tibetan Buddhism, views these. So could you talk a bit about it and
Mhm.
maybe
Sure.
try and provide some clarity here?
Sure. So you're right that we do use the word mind, consciousness, awareness as synonyms interchangeably. So generally, there's no real significant difference between when we're talking about the mind or consciousness or awareness. Those are all pretty much the same. But then brain is totally different, right? So brain is a physical, part of our body. It's something physical, has mass and volume. We can, measure in a more or less objective way different facets of it. And there's no question that, so in traditional Tibetan Buddhism, they don't talk about the brain, right? There's no study done on the brain, but, and they just talk about the mind, what's happening with the mind. But in the last, 30 years or so, there's been a lot of dialogue, primarily spearheaded by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, with scientists, largely through the Mind Life Institute, but in other forms also. And out of that, there's a lot of research related to the Mind Life Institute, and then also far beyond that. But there's a whole new field of, see if I get the term right, contemplative neuroscience, I think it's called. So doing, neuroscientists, so we're looking at the brain, obviously, but looking at and studying what happens in the brain when people are doing different contemplative practices, like prayer or meditation, and so forth. So clearly there's in general, there's a lot of correlation between activity in the brain and then our mind. A real hardcore materialist, is like a neuroscientist, like the mainstream. These days the mainstream, maybe it's becoming less so, but the mainstream scientific view among physical scientists is that um, mind is something that can't be verified to exist or not to exist because it's not something measurable in an objective way. So we can subjectively report on what we feel is happening in our mind, but that's not something like, I can't see your mind, you can't see my mind. We can't, so there's no way to measure and have some kind of objective experimentation on the mind. So like neuroscientists typically say, the mind is what the brain does. Whereas the brain, we can look at, see the neurons, the different cells, and the blood, measure the blood rates of blood flow and electrical activity, and so forth. But obviously, like when we feel, I mean, people who want to argue for the existence of mind, of consciousness, will argue, but there's qualia, right? We have a feeling of thinking about this. We have a thought. We are thinking about something, and that thought, that process of thought, or that memory, that experience of remembering something, or the experience of tasting a cup of coffee, or being in love, or whatever, those experiences are real. Like, as a subjective person, we have no doubt that we have those experiences, and yet you can't point to anything in the brain and say that is that experience. There's nothing in the brain. There's no activity, physical activity in the brain that you can point to and say that is that experience. So therefore, they say there definitely is something, conscious experience that we have, and that's not the brain. But then you can look at the brain while people are having conscious experience and know that there's a correlation, right, between the two.
Yeah, thank you, Venerable. I'll let others ask, and if there are no questions, I may have some follow-up towards the end. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a big question, right? There's a lot. There's a lot of interesting things going on. I mean, a big question that comes is, well, I mean, because for the Buddhists, they accept the existence of past and future lives, right? So that necessitates there being a level of consciousness that can exist independent of the brain without relying upon a functioning brain. Because of course, when we die, the brain ceases to function.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Somebody has a question, but Venerable, we have many questions in the chat as well. But Mary Ellen, go ahead.
Thank you, Venerable. This question has to do with being still when you're seated in meditation. When I work to put like an outline in my head so that I memorize something so that then I can use it when I sit down on the cushion, I tend to be doing something while I'm memorizing. There's usually movement involved, either rhythmic movement or repetitive movement, like when you're cutting something or when that's the way I memorize. That's the way I've conditioned myself to memorize. And then when I sit down on the cushion, to call those things back up without that rhythmic movement, I have a harder time. And then is that movement then, I don't have to be cutting something, but moving my feet, or is that counterproductive to the meditation? And is there a way to kind of get rid of that?
I don't think it's counterproductive. I think it is. I think it's true. It is helpful. Like in the monastery, when people memorize, most of the monks, they walk up and down when they're memorizing. They like to move around. And a lot of them, they have particular things like a finger snap, or they have little movements they make while they're newly memorizing something. I mean, even when they're sitting and reciting things they've memorized, they usually rock back and forth. They don't sit still. But I think in general, it is. I mean, it's harder to recall anything you've memorized in a setting that's slightly different, and that's just that's just the nature of memory, how it works. So I don't think you're doing anything wrong to move while you remember. I think it does help to remember something newly, but to be able to recall it while you're just sitting still, I think it's just it's kind of something you just have to do by rote, and gradually get better at it. Like one of the most difficult things, we try to do in the monastery is memorize a text like the Ornament of Clear Realization. And it's easy to recite it from the beginning straight through, like the Heart Sutra. Imagine you memorize the Heart Sutra. It's easy to recite it, start at the beginning and recite it straight through. But if you try to pull out a line from the middle and quote it to someone, it's really difficult. Even you can recite the whole thing easily. To pull out a line from the middle and quote it is extremely difficult. I think it's a similar kind of difficulty. But you just have to practice it and do it again and again, and then gradually you get better at it.
Thank you.
Why don't we take one question from the chat? I'll open up the
Yes,
chat box.
sure, Venerable. So I'll go by the order. So Venerable, someone is asking, how is a breathing exercise different than meditation?
How is it?
What
I
is
don't see
the
that.
difference between a breathing
Okay.
exercises, breath exercises, and meditation?
Oh, what's the difference between breathing exercises and meditation? I mean, they can go together, but, or I mean, you could just do one or the other. You know, I don't know. I mean, in like classical Buddhist teachings, we don't really teach many breathing exercises, but the one I mentioned was the 9-round breathing. Yeah, which comes from kind of teachings by the Indian Pandit Naropa. But in that, you visualize different the energy channels in the body, one on the right, the left, and the one in the middle. And then imagine inhaling air through your breath as you inhaling breath through the, I think first to the left, and then exhale to the right, and then to the right, and then exhale to the left, and then through both, and then imagine they come into the central channel and exhale through that, exhale ignorance. So that's a kind of breathing exercise that goes together with meditation. But of course, you can do breathing exercises totally separate from meditation in a way. But then, I mean, it comes to the question: well, what is meditation, right? How do you define meditation? Basically, I mean, meditation is when you're intentionally focusing your attention on something. But that's a little too vague, right? So, because you can focus your attention on something with a kind of malevolent intention or just a kind of neutral motivation. So I think meditation, we should qualify it that we focus our attention on something with a virtuous motivation, right? With the intention to bring about some welfare or benefit for ourselves and others. And then there's the aspect of repetition. You repeatedly do that in order to train yourself in having better and better kind of quality of attention of what you're focusing your mind on. But I think I was trying to make the point that just doing breathing exercises, like, I don't know, apart from Buddhism, I learned from friends how to do sort of Qigong, do deep breathing in sort of Chinese system. It's not taught as a kind of meditation, but it does help to calm the mind a lot, to breathe deep and then hold your breath in your abdomen for a while and then exhale. I'm sure there's similar breathing exercises in the Indian traditions. But to kind of regulate your breathing, it does help sort of calm your mind very quickly. So it can be helpful for meditation. And then another way, I mean, one of the very initial instructions in Buddhist meditation is to take your breath as an object of focus. So just to breathe naturally, but observe your breath. And by simply observing your breath and letting go of other thoughts and stop letting go of judgments and memories and planning, just simply observing your breath, naturally your mind becomes more calm, and then your breathing becomes more slow, more steady. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but you can follow up with another question if you like.
Venerable, the next question is how to do meditation consistently. I always get distracted after a few minutes and thought starts to come in.
Yeah. Well, first, how to do meditation consistently. It helps a lot if you can find something enjoyable about it, right? We all like to do things we enjoy. And to make ourselves do things we don't enjoy is really difficult. So see if you can find something enjoyable, about meditating. And one way it helps is how you think about it. Instead of thinking about it like, I have a lot of anxiety and my mind is really distracted, I need to fix that, and thereby I'm going to sit down and meditate. Then it kind of is kind of like, like, my teeth are dirty and I might have cavities, so I'm going to go to the dentist, as much as I really don't want to, but I have to go or else. So try not to think about it like that. Right? Try to think about meditation more like, you know, I have so many things to think about every day, but I'm going to give myself 10 minutes where I just don't have to think about all those things. I can let all that stuff go and just care for myself, right? And just sit quietly and relax and enjoy some, you know, some peace and quiet alone with my own mind. And try to find, yeah, a kind of quality of presence that you just really enjoy, and accept that, yeah, there are other thoughts are going to arise which we don't particularly want to arise, but just think it's okay. It's not a problem. And just for the time being, I don't have to deal with those thoughts. I don't have to chase them. I don't have to decide whether they're good or bad, whether I need them or not. Just let them be and observe, right? It's kind of like, you know, imagine you commute to work by walking through a particular neighborhood or walking through a train station, and every day you just walk through that space where there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of other people, there's a lot of movement activity, and every day you just walk through that space, you know, look, going where you want to go and coming back. But you never, there's a bench on the side though that you never sat down on and just observed all the people walking by. So meditation is kind of like, okay, just sit down on that bench for a minute and stop thinking about where you want to go, or, you know, where you're coming from or what you're doing. Just sit and watch and enjoy the whole scene. So kind of think about that, like your own mind like that. Like every day we have all this stuff we have to do. We have to get up, then wash, then get the kids to school, then go to work, then buy the groceries, then cook dinner, then clean, then, you know, prepare for bed, then get to sleep so I can get up again tomorrow and do the whole thing again. Like, so we're so busy in our lives, that it's really, it can be a really nice thing just to give ourselves, you know, the space to sit, just sit quietly and watch what's going on in our mind, and also see what's, you know, see what's happening in our heart. You know, how do we feel about things? Is there something, you know, bothering us? And then give ourselves time just to focus on just looking at that, getting to know ourselves better in a way. So, but then there's also the discipline part. I mean, it is good just to make a time in your schedule when you can fit, and try to sit on the same, in the same place in your house or your apartment every day. Put things, you know, pictures or incense or cushions or whatever things in the environment that you enjoy, offerings of fruit or flowers or whatever, and try to just sit there every day. Like recently, I know I started, make a reminder for yourself to do it. Recently, I started studying a language, Duolingo, this app. I'm really impressed with the way they designed this app. But it sends you a reminder every day, and you get like reward for a streak. You know? So if you do at least one lesson every day, which just takes, you know, 5 minutes or less, it's like, you know, they give you so many little encouragement kind of messages that, yeah, it easily, and I know many friends who are using it too, it easily becomes part of your routine, because they kind of make it fun with these animated characters, and then you get all these little rewards for even one right question. It's like, oh, make a big deal. So you have to use those kind of tricks. Give yourself a lot of positive reinforcement. Like every day you're able to, you know, sit down and do meditation, whether you can focus or not, doesn't matter. The fact that you're trying to focus your mind, definitely it will improve, right? Your ability to sit and focus, direct your attention in the way you want, will definitely grow. Just like anything we do, we only get better at that. We don't know how to do. We get better at it, right? Naturally. Yeah, those are some ideas.
Mm. Okay. So we have many more questions. Just FYI, if your question is not asked today by 10 p.m., you can always come back next Sunday and we'll ask your question again. Okay. And then we go to Venerable. We have this question: if I meditate often, is it given that I will never lose my temper and I will always remain calm?
If I meditate often, is it given that I will never lose my temper and always remain calm?
Yeah.
That's the goal. You know, but that not like right away, but we should be able to see some improvement, right? And I think for most people, yeah, well, they say like this, like you should, first of all, I mean, there's different ways to meditate, right? So just watching the breath I'm not sure. It should make you more calm. Hopefully lose your temper a little less, but it's not a real direct, it's kind of an indirect sort of antidote. The more direct antidote to, losing your temper is to analyze, well, what is causing, what's bothering you, what's upsetting you. Every instance of being angry about something is because we're attached to something else and we're not getting what we want, right? So you have to analyze that to see what is it that you want so badly that you're not getting, that's making you upset, and can you kind of reduce the intensity of grasping around that and be a little bit more tolerant, um, a little bit more content, and not be so demanding, um, about things. And then also to think about the drawbacks of losing your temper, how it hurts other people's feelings, causes other people to, be afraid, be uncomfortable around you, be nervous that something they do is going to set you off, how it causes you, to say things that later you regret and you have to apologize for, and you feel bad for not being able to apologize for, and how it causes it's physically it's bad for you, causes your blood pressure to go up, and it can destroy, friendships that have been built up over a long time. There's so many drawbacks of anger, right? So another way to reduce is to think about the drawbacks. And another antidote to anger is just try to be more patient. And another antidote is to try to habituate your mind to loving kindness, to really having a kind-hearted attitude towards other people, right? That can reduce the likelihood that you lose your temper, because you're putting effort regularly into just really wanting others to be happy, right? So those are more direct kind of ways to reduce anger, and reduce the likelihood that you lose your temper, than just doing like breathing meditation. But if you practice, like I said, I mean, that's the great thing about our, just like our body is changing, right? Our mind is changing moment by moment, whether we want it to or not. So if we don't give much thought to how our mind is changing, then it just changes in ways that we've become habituated to in this life, from childhood and since past lives. Whereas, meditation, it gives us an option. It gives us the ability to become more conscientious about how we're directing our attention, how we're using our mind moment by moment, what kind of thought patterns and emotional patterns that we have, and we can definitely change those, right? Just requires repeated effort.
Venerable, the next question is, I tend to doze off sometimes during meditations. How do I be alert and focused?
Yeah, one is, wash your face before you sit down. Make sure you get a good sleep the night before. Don't meditate last thing in the day when you're exhausted and really tired. Try to meditate in the morning after you wake up, or if you can wake up a little earlier. Take a few deep breaths. There's many antidotes. One is when you have to look at why you're dozing off. Is it because you're trying to meditate on a full stomach, or because you're just tired, you just haven't slept enough, or I don't know. You have to look at why it is that you're dozing off, why you're meditating, and try to remedy to that. There's a few questions in the chat box here in Zoom, Aman.
Yeah, so I'm asking from the chat window only, Venerable.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because
So
I'm
some
not
of
the
them
ones
asked,
you're reading are not the ones I'm
no,
seeing.
some of them asked me personally, which can't be seen by everyone. So I'm
I
asking those as well. Yeah.
Okay, can I answer some of the ones that I guess can be seen? I don't know
Yeah,
if they're
sure.
sent to me or to everyone.
Yeah, those are sent to everyone.
Okay.
But there are some which was sent personally to
Oh,
me.
the doze off one, I see. Okay, I see. So here's another one. Can meditation be recommended to an individual who is frequently engaged in distractions and has anxiety issues, for the same? How can we channelize meditation to overcome such things? Yes, and people can try. Someone who has anxiety issues, yeah, you can, yeah, definitely can recommend. Yeah, start with breathing meditation, and then, but yeah, kind of similar to anger, what's going to be more effective gradually is to learn to look at, analyze and try to look for what are the sources of the anxiety, and then gradually work with that. But that, that might require a little bit more kind of learning different kind of types of meditation. But like for example, reflecting on impermanence can help with anxiety, and loving kindness. But really, the most effective thing is going to be, looking to see what is the source of anxiety. What am I worried about? Is that a realistic thought or not? What are the, am I exaggerating the likelihood of, that something terrible happening? Or because there's all different. I mean, there's all different kinds of thought patterns that can go along with anxiety. So you need to look more specifically at what are the kinds of thought patterns that are causing the person is causing their specific kind of anxiety, and then work with those. Then the next one there is, while meditation, breathing remains locked automatically in heart. Is it okay? Appears heart will stop beating. That doesn't sound okay. Really, we don't want your heart to stop beating. I'm not sure what you mean. Breathing remains locked automatically in the heart. Generally, I mean, in this, yeah, in the generally in the meditation instruction in this Nalanda tradition, it's advised to not what do you say? Not modify your breathing in any way. Just breathe naturally, for the most part. Breathe naturally. You want your energy to flow kind of freely, smoothly, in a relaxed, kind of calm way. So if there's a feeling that your breath is remaining locked in your heart, it's, yeah, probably good to try to kind of imagine loosening that up, and the breath flowing freely through your heart chakra, throughout your whole body. I'm not sure though, exactly what kind of experience you're talking about. It would be easier if we could discuss it a bit. But there can be a sensation, while you're meditating, that you lose sort of sense of your body, or the breath can be very, very subtle, such that you're not. It almost feels like you're going to stop breathing, but you won't. Just can be in a kind of deeply relaxed state. But that's not the objective of meditation. Is not to kind of reduce breathing like that. Not in this system, anyway. Okay, we should stop there.
Yeah.
Continue next week. Time is up. Thank you for all your wonderful questions. It's been great discussing this with you. So I hope, yeah, something we discussed is helpful to all of you. It's definitely, I think, a good question to ask ourselves, like, when am I restless? Yeah, this restlessness or distraction, is it a problem for me? When am I more distracted? When am I less distracted? Yeah, do I ruminate? If so, what about? How is it kind of a deficit in different situations? How can it be have better quality of attention and focus in different situations? All those things are good things to think about. Anyway, so let's dedicate our merit, whatever merit we've created together, for the flourishing of all beneficial spiritual teachings, spiritual traditions, especially for the long and stable lives of all of our teachers, as well as Dalai Lama and so forth. And then especially that all sentient beings, every sentient being without excluding any, May they all be free from every form of suffering, especially mental suffering, and have every form of well-being and happiness in this and all future lives. And may we and all sentient beings quickly achieve the peerless state of full enlightenment. Okay. And may Choe Khor Sum Ling also, center in Bangalore, continue to flourish and prosper and be able to offer teachings to many, many people. Okay, back to you, Aman.
Yeah, Venerable, thank you so much. Thank you. This was amazing. We'll put on the recording on YouTube, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Next topic is Ask Venerable anything on Buddhism. So that would be interesting at 9 p.m. But yeah, but we could discuss Venerable if you wanted to be on something else, of course.
Buddhism's quite broad.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's the topic. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can, I don't know.
Sure.
Anything, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. Venerable, I'll
Awesome.
share the list of topics again, and maybe we could have a discussion on that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should review. I forgot. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have
you,
a good week.
Venerable.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.